My favorite part of the brain, the amygdala. By myself, Nicole A. Sanders. What we know. It is a major part of the limbic system, and it primarily involved with how we process our emotions and memories with fear. It can help with regulating our emotional responses with our feelings of happiness, fear, anxiety, and anger. When stimulated electronically, animals will show aggression, and when removed, no longer will show aggression. It can play a key role on how we assess and respond to environmental threats or challenges. As you can see in this picture here, I circled what the amygdala is looking like in this picture. Um, the amygdala's connections. It has a widespread connection to various parts throughout our brain, which it can allow to receive sensory and influence responses that we give. The input from the thalamus is more responsible for the visual, auditory, and somatosensory areas of our brain. The output to the thalamus and the brain stems, which allows emotional responses such as fear, aggression, happiness, sadness. There are bidirectional connections to a prefrontal cortex that integrates our emotions, cognition, and our decision making. There's bidirectional connections to the hippocampus, which links emotions to our memories. Output to the nucleus accumbens and ventral stratum is involved in our reward processing. There are two amygdalae in each of our brain's hemispheres, and there are three known functionally distinct parts. Number one, the medial group of subnuclei. That has connections to our olfactory bulb and cortex and connects to the hypothalamus for social and reproductive behaviors. The basolateral group has connections with the cerebral cortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex with the frontal lobes. That links sensory stimuli with emotional responses and memory formation. The central anterior group of the nuclei includes many connections to the brainstem, the hypothalamus, and other sensory structures. It initiates physiological fear responses through its pathways. Emotional learning and behaviors, particularly responsible for the emotion of fear. Pavlovian conditioning can produce the emotion of fear, which is when another neural stimulus is paired with an aversive unconditioned stimulus, such as loud banging each time someone is presented a picture of strangers' faces, for example. After your repeated pairing will produce the fear response, and hopefully you won't want to be around strangers. When we make a decision, it can be based on our own personal emotions or pay more attention to something that brings us positive emotion. So that being said, you know, making a decision on whether or not to buy a house, and then, you know, or paying more attention to something that brings us positive emotions. Like I like to do diamond dye paintings. It helps with our memories. The more emotion felt in any moment of your life, the more remarkable the memory. So, for example, you can have a birth of your child. I remember every moment of when I gave birth to my 15-year-old son. And at that time, I was 16. So it was kind of a happy and, oh my gosh, what am I going to do moment. Um, but I wouldn't change it for the world. A traumatic event, like where you were at the time of the Boston Marathon, where were you part of 9/11? Stuff like that can produce good or bad memories, and emotional traumas can cause other issues with our cognitive functions. Social behaviors and sexual orientation. The more friend groups you have, the bigger your amygdala. Studies show that a homosexual male shows patterns the same as a heterosexual female and have more of a widespread connection in their left amygdala. Homosexual females show patterns of a heterosexual male and a more widespread connection in their right amygdala. Stress and mental health. Synaptic plasticity weakens or strengthens over time within the amygdala is to be affected by the exposure to stress. The left side is associated with social anxiety, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. Amygdala dysfunctions can be associated with memory deficits in schizophrenia. And this one I found interesting was people diagnosed with depression have been shown to have hyperactivity of the left side of their amygdala. And here are my resources.